Elena had been carrying plates and taking orders at Bella Vista for 3 years now. Every shift felt the same. The same faces, the same complaints about overcooked pasta, the same tired feet at the end of a long night. She was 28 years old, and sometimes when she caught her reflection in the restaurant's giant mirrors, she wondered if this was all there would ever be. The restaurant itself was beautiful, she had to admit that. Located in the heart of downtown Chicago, Bella Vista attracted the kind of people who didn't blink at a $40 appetizer. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm light over white tablecloths and gleaming silverware. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city skyline that tourists loved to photograph. It was the kind of place that made people feel important just by walking through the door. Elena knew how to move through that world without really being part of it. She had perfected the art of being invisible while still being attentive. She could read a table within minutes of greeting them. The business executives who barely looked up from their phones. The nervous young man about to propose. The elderly couple who came every Thursday and always ordered the same thing. She remembered their preferences, brought extra napkins before they asked, and smiled even when her back ached and her feet screamed for rest. What none of them knew, what nobody at the restaurant knew, was what Elena did before her alarm went off each morning. While the city still slept and darkness pressed against her apartment windows, she would sit at her piano. It was an old upright, the kind someone's grandmother might have owned. She had bought it from a church sale for $300, and it had taken 4 of her neighbors to help carry it up 3 flights of stairs. The wood was scratched. Some of the ivory keys had yellowed with age, and it desperately needed tuning. But it was hers. Every morning from 5 to 7, Elena played. Her fingers knew the keyboard the way other people knew their own faces. She played Chopin and Debussy, Rachmaninoff and Liszt. She played pieces so complex that her hands would cramp and her shoulders would tense, but she never stopped. Music was the thing that made her feel alive, the thing that made everything else bearable. It was the secret she carried with her through every shift, every rude customer, every night she came home smelling like garlic and exhaustion. On this particular Tuesday evening in November, the restaurant was busy but not overwhelming. The dinner rush had started around 6, and now at 7:30, nearly every table was full. Elena moved between them with practiced efficiency, her notepad always ready, her smile always in place. She had learned long ago how to be pleasant without being personal, how to serve without being servile. At table 12, a group of business people were celebrating some kind of deal. They ordered expensive wine and barely touched their food, too busy laughing and congratulating each other. At table 5, a couple sat in awkward silence, studying their menus like they contained the secrets of the universe. First date, Elena guessed. Not going well. At table 8, a family with 2 small children struggled to keep the peace. The mother looked exhausted. The father checked his watch repeatedly. And the kids were more interested in building towers out of sugar packets than eating their dinner. And in the corner, at the best table in the house, sat a woman dining alone. She had arrived precisely at 7 and had requested that specific table, the one by the window with the perfect view. She was maybe in her 50s, dressed simply but expensively, and she took her time with everything. She studied the menu like it was a novel. She sipped her wine slowly, pausing between each taste. She made notes in a small leather journal between courses. Elena had served enough people to recognize when someone was really paying attention. This woman wasn't just eating dinner. She was analyzing it, evaluating it. Elena felt a small flutter of nervousness when she approached the table, though she couldn't say why. The restaurant's grand piano sat in its usual spot near the windows, gleaming under the soft lights. It was a beautiful instrument, probably worth more than Elena made in 2 years. A professional pianist came in on Friday and Saturday nights to play soft classical music while people ate. The rest of the week it just sat there, silent and elegant, part of the decor like the chandeliers and the white tablecloths. Elena had never touched it. She had wanted to, of course. Sometimes during slow afternoon shifts when she was setting tables, she would walk past it and let her fingers brush the closed lid. But actually sitting down and playing, that would be crossing a line. She was the waitress. The piano belonged to another world, one she used to be part of but had left behind. People didn't know that about her. They didn't know she had once been a serious music student, that she had won competitions and performed in recitals. They didn't know she had earned a full scholarship to a prestigious conservatory, that professors had told her she had real talent, maybe even a future as a concert pianist. They didn't know that she had given it all up when her mother got sick during her second year. Cancer. The word had changed everything. Elena had withdrawn from school and come home to help. The medical bills had piled up despite the insurance. Someone needed to work, to pay for treatments and medications and all the little things that insurance didn't cover. Her father was already working 2 jobs. Her younger brother was still in high school. So Elena had found work at Bella Vista, intending it to be temporary, just until her mother got better. Just until things stabilized. Her mother had survived, thank God. She was in remission now, living in Florida with Elena's aunt, enjoying the sunshine and taking it easy. But by then, Elena had accumulated her own debts. Student loans still needed to be paid, even if you didn't finish your degree. Rent needed to be covered. Life had a way of moving forward whether you were ready or not. Going back to school, pursuing music seriously, it had started to feel like a dream from someone else's life. So she played alone in her apartment each morning, and she carried plates each evening, and she tried not to think too much about the path not taken. Most days she was fine with it. She told herself that music could be a hobby, that not everything had to be a career. She told herself that there was dignity in honest work, that serving people was nothing to be ashamed of. She told herself a lot of things, but sometimes when she walked past that grand piano, she felt an ache so deep it was almost physical. Sometimes she dreamed about sitting down at it, about feeling those keys under her fingers, about filling that beautiful restaurant with the kind of music that made people stop and really listen. Sometimes she wondered what would happen if she just did it, if she just sat down and played like nobody was watching. Tonight, as she refilled water glasses and delivered entrees and smiled at customers who barely saw her, Elena had no idea that her wondering was about to become reality. She had no idea that in less than an hour, everything would change. She had no idea that the woman sitting alone by the window, making careful notes in her journal, would end up playing a crucial role in the most important evening of her life. For now, she was just a waitress carrying plates. For now, the piano sat silent in its corner. For now, Elena's talent remained hidden, known only to the walls of her small apartment and the keys of her battered upright piano. But not for much longer. The evening was moving along smoothly until it wasn't. Elena was in the kitchen, waiting for Table 12's dessert order, when she heard Mr. Castellano's voice rising above the usual dinner noise. He was the restaurant manager, a short man with gray hair who rarely raised his voice about anything. That's how Elena knew something was wrong. She peeked around the corner and saw him standing near the host stand, his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand rubbing his forehead the way people do when they're getting a migraine. Even from a distance, she could read the tension in his shoulders. "What do you mean you can't make it?" he was saying into the phone, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "David, you're supposed to be here in 15 minutes. We have a full dining room." Elena couldn't hear the response, but she could see Mr. Castellano's face getting redder. The kitchen staff had started to notice too. Tony, the head chef, stood in the doorway watching with his arms crossed. The other servers exchanged worried glances. When Mr. Castellano was upset, everyone felt it. "I understand you're sick," Mr. Castellano continued, his voice dropping lower but somehow more intense. "But you couldn't have called earlier? You couldn't have given us some warning?" A pause. "Fine. Yes. Feel better." He ended the call and stood there for a moment, staring at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. Then he noticed everyone watching him and quickly composed himself, straightening his tie and smoothing his hair. But Elena could see the panic in his eyes. David was their Tuesday night pianist. Not as skilled as the weekend musician, but reliable and pleasant enough. More importantly, he was supposed to be here, filling the dining room with soft background music. And now he wasn't coming. Mr. Castellano disappeared into his office, and Elena heard him making more calls. She went back to work, delivering desserts and clearing plates, but she kept half her attention on the manager's increasingly desperate phone conversations. He was calling other pianists, she realized, trying to find anyone who could come in at the last minute on a Tuesday night. No luck. She could tell by the way his shoulders sagged more with each call. The thing was, most nights it wouldn't have mattered that much. Sure, the piano music was nice, but people came to Bella Vista for the food and the atmosphere. They barely noticed the background music, which was kind of the point. It was supposed to be there without being there, you know? like air conditioning or good lighting. You only noticed when it was missing, but tonight was different. Tonight that woman was sitting at table 8. The one who had been taking notes all evening. The one who Elena had a weird feeling about. She was right to be worried. About 20 minutes after David's phone call, Mr. Castellano gathered the staff in the kitchen. His face looked pale under the fluorescent lights. "That woman at table 8, he said quietly, like he was afraid she might hear him through the walls. "I just got confirmation. She's Rebecca Chen, the food critic from the Tribune." The kitchen went silent. Everyone knew that name. Rebecca Chen could make or break a restaurant with a single review. She didn't visit often, and she didn't announce herself. She just showed up, observed everything, and then wrote about it. Her reviews were read by thousands of people, and they trusted her opinion completely. She specifically mentioned in her reservation notes that she was looking forward to experiencing our complete atmosphere. Mr. Castellano continued. "That includes the live piano music that we advertise on our website." Elena felt her stomach drop. She glanced toward the dining room where the grand piano sat silent. Suddenly, that empty corner felt very obvious, very wrong. Mr. Castellano made a few more desperate calls right there in the kitchen, his voice low and urgent. But it was 8:30 on a Tuesday night. Professional pianists had other jobs, other commitments. Nobody was available on this kind of notice. Tony suggested playing recorded music through the speakers, but Mr. Castellano shook his head. "We advertise live piano. That's what makes us different from every other Italian restaurant in Chicago. Recorded music will make us look cheap or worse, dishonest." He was right, Elena thought. Rebecca Chen would definitely notice the difference. She seemed like someone who noticed everything. The servers went back to work, but the mood had changed. Everyone moved a little faster, smiled a little harder, trying to make up for the missing music with extra good service. But you can't replace music with politeness. The dining room felt different without it. Quieter, more exposed. Every clink of silverware, every conversation seemed louder than it should be. Elena refilled water glasses and tried not to look at the piano. Her heart was beating too fast and her hands felt shaky. A crazy idea had started forming in her mind and she was trying very hard to push it away. It was a stupid idea. A terrifying idea. An impossible idea. But it wouldn't go away. She had been playing piano for 20 years. She knew hundreds of pieces by heart. She could sight read almost anything. She had performed in front of audiences before, back when she was a student. Back when that was her life, but that was different. That was in concert halls and competition rooms where everyone came to listen to music. This was a restaurant. She was a waitress. Nobody here knew she could even play chopsticks, let alone real classical music. What would people think? What would Mr. Castellano think? More importantly, what if she messed up? What if her hands shook and she hit wrong notes? What if she embarrassed herself in the restaurant? What if Rebecca Chen wrote about the desperate waitress who tried to play piano and failed miserably? Elena delivered someone's entree and cleared another table, all while arguing with herself in her head. The sensible part of her brain said to keep quiet, do her job, let Mr. Castellano figure it out. The other part, the part that woke up at 5 every morning to play a beat-up piano in a tiny apartment, that part was screaming at her to do something. She found herself walking toward Mr. Castellano's office before she had really decided to. Her feet just carried her there like they had a mind of their own. He was sitting at his desk, staring at his computer screen with the kind of blank expression people get when they're out of options. Elena knocked softly on the door frame. He looked up, and for a second she saw how tired he was. Mr. Castellano worked hard for this restaurant. It was his baby, his pride. A bad review from Rebecca Chen could hurt business for months. "Mr. Castellano," Elena said, and her voice came out quieter than she intended. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I can play." He blinked at her, confused. "Play what?" "Piano. I can play the piano." The confusion on his face deepened, mixed now with something like suspicion. He had known Elena for 3 years. She was reliable, punctual, good with customers. But a pianist? He studied her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You can play piano," he repeated slowly, like he was testing whether the words made sense. "Yes." Elena's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I studied music in college. I played for years. I know the kind of pieces you need. Classical background music. I can do it." Mr. Castellano stood up from his desk and came around to look at her more closely. Elena, this isn't a joke. You can actually play? Like real music? Real music, she confirmed. Her hands were shaking now, so she clasped them behind her back. I promise I won't embarrass you. If you don't like how I sound, I'll stop, but I can help, if you want. He stared at her for what felt like an hour but was probably only 10 seconds. She could see him weighing his options. Trust the quiet waitress who had never mentioned being able to play piano, or face Rebecca Chen's review with a silent corner where live music should be. Finally, he nodded. Just once, sharp and decisive. Okay, keep it simple, nothing too complicated. Just background music, nice and quiet. Can you do that? Yes, Elena said, even though her whole body was now shaking. Then go. Now. We're already running late. Elena untied her apron with fingers that didn't want to cooperate. This was really happening. She was really going to do this. She handed the apron to Mr. Castellano, who took it with a dazed expression, like he still couldn't quite believe this was his solution. As she walked out of the office toward the dining room, toward that beautiful grand piano she had never touched, Elena felt like she was in a dream. Or maybe a nightmare. She honestly couldn't tell which, but she kept walking, one foot in front of the other. Toward the piano, toward whatever was about to happen next. Walking across that dining room felt like walking through water. Everything moved in slow motion. Elena was aware of every sound, every movement, every pair of eyes that might turn her way. Her server uniform suddenly felt too tight, too visible. She had never been self-conscious about it before, but now she felt like everyone must be wondering what the waitress was doing approaching the piano. The instrument sat waiting for her, its polished black surface reflecting the soft restaurant lighting. It was a Steinway Grand, the kind of piano most musicians only dreamed about playing, the kind of piano she used to dream about, back when dreams felt possible. A few diners glanced over as she approached, mild curiosity on their faces. Most people kept eating, kept talking. They had no idea what was about to happen. Elena had no idea what was about to happen. Her hands were ice cold despite the warmth of the restaurant. She reached the piano bench and stood there for a moment, frozen. This was insane. What was she thinking? She hadn't performed in front of people in years. She practiced alone in her apartment where nobody could hear her mistakes, where she could stop and start over as many times as she needed. This was different. This was real. But Mr. Castellano was watching from near the kitchen, hope and anxiety written all over his face. Rebecca Chen was still sitting at her table by the window, probably wondering why the promised live music hadn't started yet. There was no backing out now. Elena sat down on the bench and immediately felt the difference. The seat was positioned perfectly, the height just right. Her feet found the pedals like they had been waiting for her. She adjusted her posture, straightened her back the way her old piano teacher had taught her, hands on the keys. Not pressing yet, just resting there, feeling the cool, smooth surface. The piano was perfectly in tune. Of course it was. This wasn't her apartment upright with its sticky keys and off-pitched notes. This was a professional instrument that probably got serviced monthly. She could feel the quality of it just from that first touch. Her heart was beating so fast she thought she might pass out. She took a deep breath, trying to remember what her teacher used to say. The music knows where it wants to go. You just have to trust it and follow. She started with Debussy's Clair de Lune. It was a safe choice, a piece everyone knew, beautiful but not showy. Her fingers found the opening notes soft and gentle like moonlight on water. That's what the title meant after all. Moonlight. The first few measures came out shaky. She could hear the nervousness in her playing, the slight hesitation between notes, but the piano responded so beautifully to her touch that it almost didn't matter. Even her nervous playing sounded better on this instrument than her best work did on her apartment piano. She kept going, forcing herself to breathe, to relax. The muscle memory was there, built up over years of practice. Her fingers knew where to go. Slowly, the nervousness started to fade, replaced by something else. Focus, concentration. The rest of the restaurant began to blur around her. At table 12, the business people kept celebrating, barely noticing the music starting. At table 5, the awkward first-date couple seemed to relax a little, grateful for something to fill the silence between them. The family with the small children at table 8 actually quieted down, the kids momentarily distracted by the sound. Mr. Castellano exhaled with visible relief. The music was working. It was filling the space like it was supposed to, providing that background atmosphere that made Bella Vista special. Elena was doing exactly what he had asked her to do. She finished Clair de Lune and transitioned smoothly into another Debussy piece. Arabesque No. 1. Still safe, still quiet and pretty. Background music, nothing too complicated, just like Mr. Castellano had requested. But inside something was stirring. Elena could feel it building in her chest, in her fingertips. She was playing well, better than she had expected. But she was holding back, keeping herself restrained. She was playing like someone trying not to be noticed, and part of her hated that. This piano deserved better. She deserved better. Still, she pushed the feeling down and continued with safer choices. She played some Chopin, a simple waltz that her students used to learn. She played Erik Satie's Gymnopédie No. 1, which was so gentle it was almost hypnotic. She played pieces that were beautiful but undemanding, present but not intrusive. Time passed. She wasn't sure how much. When you're lost in music, minutes feel like seconds or hours, you can never tell which. She knew she had played through at least 20 minutes of material, maybe more. Her initial nervousness had faded completely. Now she was just playing, her fingers moving across the keys with practiced ease. Rebecca Chen, the food critic, had finished her main course and was working on dessert. Elena could see her in her peripheral vision, still taking notes, still observing everything. Was she writing about the music? About the fact that the pianist was actually the waitress? Elena tried not to think about it. A few more diners had arrived during her playing. They probably assumed she was the regular pianist, that this was how it always was. They didn't know about the panic an hour ago, about the desperate phone calls and the manager's worried face. They just heard music and thought it was normal. That should have made Elena feel good. She was doing her job, solving the problem, being invisible in the way Mr. Castellano wanted. But that stirring feeling in her chest was getting stronger. The voice in her head that had been quiet for 3 years was starting to speak up again. "You can play better than this," it whispered. "You know you can." She pushed it away and started another safe piece. Pachelbel's Canon in D, everyone knew it. Wedding music. Pleasant and predictable. Her fingers moved through the familiar progression almost automatically. But the voice wouldn't shut up. "When will you get this chance again? When will you sit at a piano like this in front of people who are actually listening? When will you stop hiding?" Elena finished the canon and paused, her hands resting on the keys. The dining room had thinned out considerably. It was getting late, past 9:30 now. Most tables had cleared. The business people were gone. The first date couple was gone. The family with kids was gone. Only a handful of people remained. Rebecca Chen was still there, lingering over coffee. An elderly couple sat near the window, holding hands across the table. 2 women who looked like old friends sat talking quietly, a man dining alone reading a book between bites. Mr. Castellano was no longer hovering nervously by the kitchen. He had disappeared into his office, satisfied that the crisis was handled. The other servers were doing their closing duties, wiping down tables and refilling salt shakers. The pressure was off. The danger had passed. She had done what was needed. So why did Elena feel so empty? She sat there at the piano, staring at the keys, fighting with herself. The smart thing would be to play a few more safe pieces and then quietly stop. Go back to being a waitress. Collect her tips and go home to her tiny apartment and her beat-up piano. Forget this ever happened. But when would she get this chance again? When would she sit at an instrument this beautiful, with an audience that was actually paying attention even if only a little? When would she stop being afraid? Her hands moved to a different position on the keys. Not the opening of another simple, pretty piece. Something else. Something she had been practicing for 2 years. Something she played alone in her apartment at 5 in the morning when nobody could hear her, when she could pretend she was still that music student with dreams and possibilities. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the opening of the first movement. It was way too complicated for background music. It was powerful and emotional and technically demanding. It was the kind of piece that made people stop what they were doing and listen. It was the opposite of invisible. It was exactly what Mr. Castellano had told her not to play. Elena knew she shouldn't do it. The logical part of her brain was screaming at her to stop, to play it safe, to not risk everything she had just accomplished. But her fingers were already moving, finding the opening chords. Deep and resonant, they rang out through the restaurant like a bell. Several heads turned immediately. The sound was too big, too present to ignore. This wasn't background music anymore. This was something else entirely. Mr. Castellanos' head popped out of his office, his eyes wide with surprise and maybe alarm. Rebecca Chen looked up from her notes, her pen frozen in midair. The elderly couple stopped their quiet conversation. Even the man with his book set it down. Elena saw all of this in her peripheral vision, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Something had broken open inside her, something she had been holding closed for 3 years. Her fingers flew across the keys, building the melody, layering in the complexity. The piece started to soar. This was why she loved music, not the gentle, pretty pieces that faded into the background. This, the kind of music that demanded to be heard, that reached inside you and grabbed your heart. The kind of music that reminded you that you were alive. She had forgotten what this felt like. Or maybe she had just been too afraid to remember. But she remembered now, and she wasn't stopping. The transformation was instant and complete. One moment Elena was the invisible waitress playing pleasant background music, and the next she was someone else entirely. Someone she used to be, someone she thought she had lost. Her posture changed first. Her shoulders rolled back, her spine straightened, her head lifted. This wasn't the hunched position of someone trying to disappear. This was the posture of a performer, of someone who had spent years training to command a stage. Her whole body became part of the music. The Rachmaninoff piece was known for being technically brutal. It required hands that could stretch across huge intervals, fingers that could move with lightning speed, and a brain that could track multiple melodic lines at once. It was the kind of piece that separated serious pianists from casual players. The kind of piece that could make or break a performance. Elena's fingers flew across the keys like they had been waiting their whole life for this moment. The melody built and swelled, filling every corner of the restaurant. It wasn't background music anymore. It was the only thing that mattered. The few remaining conversations stopped mid-sentence. The man who had been reading his book let it fall closed on the table, forgotten. The two women who had been chatting leaned back in their chairs, their eyes fixed on the piano. The elderly couple sat motionless, their hands still clasped together. But now they were watching Elena instead of each other. In the kitchen, Tony the chef had come to the doorway, a dish towel still in his hands. The servers stopped their closing work. Even the dishwasher poked his head around the corner to see what was happening. They all knew Elena. They had worked with her for 3 years, but they had never seen this person before. Mr. Castellanos stood frozen near his office door. His face showed confusion, then concern, then something else. Something like amazement. This wasn't what he had asked for. This was way beyond what he had asked for, but he couldn't look away. Rebecca Chen had set down her pen entirely. She sat perfectly still at her table, her coffee growing cold in front of her. Her eyes locked on Elena. Her expression was unreadable, but there was an intensity to her attention that hadn't been there before. Elena was barely aware of any of them. She was inside the music now, living in it. Her fingers knew every note, every phrase, every dynamic shift. She had played this piece hundreds of times in her apartment, perfecting it measure by measure, working through the difficult passages until they became second nature. All those early mornings, all those hours of practice, they had all been building to this moment. The piece moved through its first major climax, the melody soaring up and up until it felt like the ceiling couldn't contain it. Then it pulled back, becoming softer, more intimate. This was the part Elena loved most, the quiet section where the music became almost fragile, like it might break if you breathed too hard. She leaned into the piano, her touch feather-light now, coaxing out notes so soft they were almost whispers. The restaurant was so silent you could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was holding their breath, afraid to break the spell. Then the music began to build again. Slowly at first, adding layers, adding complexity. Elena's hands moved faster, reaching across the keyboard, her left hand providing the deep foundation while her right hand danced through the melody. The piece was demanding everything from her, and she was giving it willingly. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her arms were starting to ache. This wasn't like playing gentle Debussy. This was a workout, a battle, a conversation between her and the piano, and she was winning. The music swelled to another peak, even bigger than the first. The piano sang, every note crystal clear and perfectly placed. This was what a Steinway could do in the hands of someone who knew how to play it. This was why these instruments cost as much as a car. They could take everything you gave them and give it back 100 times more powerful. Elena hit a particularly difficult passage, her fingers blurring across the keys. She had struggled with this section for months, practicing it over and over until her hands cramped. But tonight it flowed out of her like water. Perfect, clean, effortless. She risked a glance up from the keys just for a second. What she saw made her heart skip. Every single person in the restaurant was watching her, not glancing over while they did something else. Actually watching, their full attention on her and the music. The staff stood clustered near the kitchen, their mouths open. Mr. Castellano had moved closer, his earlier concern replaced by something like wonder. And Rebecca Chen. The food critic sat with tears streaming down her face, not bothering to wipe them away, completely absorbed in the music. That glimpse almost broke Elena's concentration, but she pulled herself back into the piece just in time. The music was reaching its final section now, the grand finale that required every ounce of technical skill and emotional depth she possessed. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Her hands moved across the keyboard with a life of their own. The left hand thundered through bass notes while the right hand wove intricate patterns above. The melody climbed higher and higher, building tension, building energy. The piano seemed to vibrate with the force of it, every note ringing out clear and true. Elena felt tears starting to stream down her own face, but she couldn't stop to wipe them away. Her hands were too busy. The emotion of the piece, the emotion of this moment, everything she had been holding inside for 3 years, it all came pouring out through her fingers into the music. This was who she was. Not the quiet waitress who smiled and brought people their food. Not the girl who had given up her dreams to pay bills. This person sitting at this piano pouring her soul out through music. This was who she really was. The piece built to its final climax. Every muscle in her body was engaged now, her whole self focused on these last crucial measures. The melody soared one final time, reaching for something beautiful and impossible and true. Her fingers stretched across the keys, pulling out every bit of sound the piano could give, and then, with a series of powerful chords that rang through the restaurant like church bells, it was over. Elena's hands came down on the final notes and held them, letting them ring out until they faded into silence. She kept her hands on the keys even after the sound was gone, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever had just happened. The silence stretched out, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Then the restaurant erupted. Everyone was on their feet. Everyone. The elderly couple, the 2 women, the man with his book, Rebecca Chen, all the staff, Mr. Castellano. They were all standing, clapping, some of them cheering. The applause was deafening in the small space, bouncing off the walls and windows. Elena finally lifted her hands from the keys and turned around on the bench. She couldn't quite process what she was seeing. All these people applauding for her. Actually for her. Not for some famous pianist who was supposed to be here. For Elena, the waitress who nobody really noticed. Her face was wet with tears. She tried to wipe them away, but more kept coming. Her whole body was shaking. Adrenaline and exhaustion and emotion all mixed together. She felt like she might fall apart or fly apart, she wasn't sure which. Rebecca Chen was the first to move. She walked over to the piano, still crying, and for a moment just stood there looking at Elena. Then she did something unexpected. She pulled out the piano bench slightly and sat down next to Elena, right there on the bench. "I was a pianist," Rebecca said quietly, though the applause was still going on around them. "Before I became a critic, I studied at Juilliard." "I know what I just heard." Elena couldn't find words. Her throat was too tight. "That was Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto," Rebecca continued. "First movement. One of the most difficult pieces in the standard repertoire. And you just played it from memory, with technical precision and emotional depth that most professional pianists would envy." She paused, wiping her own eyes. "Who are you?" "I'm nobody," Elena managed to say. "I'm just a waitress." "No," Rebecca said firmly. "You're not." Mr. Castellano had made his way over, his face still showing shock. "Elena, I had no idea. In 3 years, you never said anything. You never mentioned that you could play like that. You told me to keep it simple," Elena said, and despite everything, she managed a small laugh. Sorry. Mr. Castellano looked like he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Elena, that was incredible. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in this restaurant, and I've been running it for 15 years. The applause was finally dying down, though people were still standing, still watching. The elderly couple had come over too, the woman's eyes shining with emotion. "Thank you," the woman said simply. "Thank you for that gift." Elena didn't know what to say to any of them. She had spent 3 years making herself invisible, and now suddenly everyone could see her, really see her. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Rebecca Chen was still sitting next to her on the piano bench, studying her face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "Tell me your story," she said. All of it. They ended up sitting at a table together, Elena and Rebecca Chen, long after the restaurant had officially closed. Mr. Castellano had sent the other staff home and locked the front door. But he stayed too, sitting quietly at the bar and listening. He needed to hear this story as much as Rebecca did. Elena told them everything. About growing up in a house where music was always playing, where her mother would hum while cooking and her father would whistle while fixing things. About piano lessons starting at age 6, with a teacher who saw something special in her and pushed her to be better. About the competitions she won as a teenager. The recitals where people actually came to hear her play. "I got a full scholarship to a conservatory," Elena said, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that Mr. Castellano had made for her. "It was everything I had ever wanted. I was going to be a concert pianist. That was the plan. That was my whole life." She told them about her second year when her mother got sick, how the diagnosis came suddenly, how everything changed overnight, about the choice that hadn't really felt like a choice at all. "Someone had to work," she said simply. "My dad was already working 2 jobs. My brother was still in high school. The medical bills were piling up even with insurance. All those little things insurance doesn't cover. They add up fast. And I had loans. Student loans that didn't care that I had to leave school. They still wanted their money every month." Rebecca listened without interrupting, her eyes focused completely on Elena. This was how she looked at food when she was evaluating a dish, Elena realized, like she was trying to understand not just what it was, but how it came to be. "So I left school and got a job here," Elena continued. "It was supposed to be temporary, just until my mom got better, just until we caught up on bills. But life doesn't pause just because you need it to. Time keeps moving. Months turned into years. My mom went into remission, thank God. She's doing well now, living in Florida with my aunt. But by then I had my own debts to manage, my own rent to pay, my own life that had gone in a different direction." "Did you ever think about going back?" Rebecca asked quietly. Elena nodded. "Every single day. But going back meant more student loans. It meant years of not earning money while I finished my degree. It meant risking everything on a career where most people don't make it. And I was tired, tired of struggling. It felt easier to just accept reality and move on." "But you kept playing," Rebecca observed. "Every morning," Elena confirmed. 5 to 7 a.m. on a beat-up old piano in my apartment. That's my secret life. The life nobody here knew about." She glanced at Mr. Castellano, who still looked stunned. "Sorry for keeping secrets," he shook his head. "Don't apologize. I should apologize for never asking. For never seeing you as anything more than a good waitress." There was a long moment of silence. Then Rebecca set down her own coffee cup and leaned forward. "What if I told you this doesn't have to be your ending?" she said. "What if I told you that what you played tonight could change everything?" Elena felt her heart start to race again. "What do you mean?" "I'm not just a food critic," Rebecca explained. "I mean, I am, but I have connections in the music world. Real connections. I spent 20 years as a performing pianist before I became a writer. I know people, orchestra directors, concert hall managers, music professors, people who are always looking for real talent." She pulled out her phone and started typing. "And I have a platform. Thousands of people read my reviews. What if I wrote about you? What if I told your story? What if I shared the video?" "What video?" Elena asked, confused. Rebecca smiled and gestured to the man who had been reading a book earlier. He was still there, sitting quietly in the corner. "That's my assistant. He records everything when I'm on assignment. Audio, video, everything. We have your entire performance recorded." The whole thing, Elena's breath caught. Her performance was recorded. Her playing Rachmaninoff, the tears, the transformation, all of it was caught on video. "With your permission," Rebecca said quickly, I would like to write an article, not about the restaurant or not just about the restaurant, about you, about the waitress who turned out to be a brilliant pianist, about talent that almost got buried under student debt and medical bills and bad luck. I don't know, Elena said, fear creeping into her voice. What if people think I'm not good enough? What if they see the video and think I'm just okay? Elena. Rebecca reached across the table and took her hand. I know piano. I spent my whole life around pianos and pianists. What you played tonight was not just okay, it was exceptional. That level of technical skill combined with that emotional depth, most professionals would kill for that. And you've been maintaining it alone, with no teacher, no support. Practicing on an old piano in your apartment at 5 in the morning. Do you understand how remarkable that is? Mr. Castellano spoke up from the bar. She's right, Elena. I don't know anything about classical music, but I know when something is special. Everyone in this restaurant tonight felt it. We all stopped everything to listen. That doesn't happen with just okay. Elena sat there trying to process what they were telling her. Part of her wanted to believe them. But another part, the part that had learned to be practical and realistic, was afraid to hope. What would happen if you wrote the article? She asked. Rebecca shrugged. I can't promise anything specific, but I can tell you what usually happens when I write about something remarkable. People pay attention. The video would get shared. You'd get noticed. Opportunities would start to come. Maybe performance opportunities, maybe teaching opportunities. Maybe someone would offer to help you finish your degree. Or maybe nothing would happen, Elena said. Maybe, Rebecca admitted, but I can guarantee nothing will happen if we don't try. Right now you're invisible. That performance tonight made you visible. The question is whether you want to stay visible or go back to being invisible. Elena thought about her apartment piano, about those early morning practice sessions where nobody could hear her. She thought about 3 years of carrying plates and smiling at customers who barely saw her. She thought about the dream she had buried so carefully that she had almost convinced herself it was gone. But it wasn't gone. Tonight proved that. The dream was still there waiting. Okay, she said finally. Write the article. Rebecca smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. You won't regret this. The article went live 3 days later. Rebecca Chen's review of Bella Vista was good, talking about the excellent food and atmosphere. But that wasn't what people focused on. They focused on the second half of the article, the part about Elena, about the scholarship student who left to help her sick mother, about the waitress who had been hiding extraordinary talent for 3 years, about the performance that had made a food critic cry. The video was embedded right in the article. Within 24 hours, it had been viewed 10,000 times. Within 48 hours, 100,000. By the end of the week, it had gone viral. Millions of people watched Elena transform from invisible waitress to extraordinary pianist right before their eyes. Her phone started ringing. Emails flooded in, invitations to audition for orchestras, offers to perform at concert halls across the city. A music professor from her old conservatory reached out, saying they had a scholarship available if she wanted to come back and finish her degree. A recording studio wanted to know if she had considered making an album. Mr. Castellano offered her a new job as Bella Vista's official evening pianist, at 3 times what she had made as a waitress. Other restaurants made similar offers. She had to start keeping a calendar just to track all the opportunities coming her way. But the moment that mattered most came 2 weeks after that Tuesday night. Elena stood backstage at a prestigious concert hall in downtown Chicago, wearing an elegant black dress instead of a server uniform. In 30 minutes, she would walk out onto that stage and perform a full recital. Her first real solo performance in 6 years, she was terrified. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together to make them stop. What if she froze up? What if she forgot the music? What if everyone realized she was just a fraud, just a waitress who got lucky one night? There was a knock on the dressing room door. Rebecca Chen came in, dressed for the concert, holding a small box. I brought you something, she said, handing Elena the box. Inside was a pin shaped like a coffee pot, small and silver, elegant in its simplicity. I thought you might want something to remember where you came from, Rebecca explained. Because where you came from matters. It's part of your story. It's part of what makes tonight special. Elena pinned it to her dress right over her heart. She looked at herself in the mirror. The elegant dress, the professional hair and makeup, the concert hall setting. It all looked like someone else's life. But the coffee pot pen, that was real. That was her. The first 3 rows are full of people from Bella Vista, Rebecca said. Mr. Castellano bought out the whole section. All your coworkers are out there. The elderly couple from that night. Even Tony the chef wore a suit. Elena felt tears starting but forced them back. She couldn't cry yet. Not before performing. You're going to be amazing, Rebecca said. Just like you were that night. Just be yourself. 20 minutes later, Elena walked out onto that stage. The lights were bright, the audience was huge, and her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. She saw the Bella Vista section, Mr. Castellano giving her a thumbs up, her former co-workers beaming with pride. She sat at the piano, another Steinway grand, and placed her hands on the keys. For just a moment, she let herself remember the scared waitress she had been 2 weeks ago. The girl who thought her dreams were dead and buried. But dreams don't die that easily. They just wait. They wait for the moment when you're brave enough to let them live again. Elena took a breath, smiled out at the audience, and began to play.